Welcome to the Charles River Conservancy Parkland show. My name is Renata von Tscharner, and today we have a very special guest. We have former Secretary of Transportation Fred Salvucci here today.
Hi.
Thank you, Fred, for coming today.
Thank you for having me.
Fred now teaches at MIT, and we're going to talk about transportation and transportation along the Charles River. And we all know, we all drive along the Charles, but the Conservancy is particularly interested of how to make the experience of bicycling, running, walking along the Charles easier and a more attractive experience. We have an amazing system here of water. We have parklands on both sides, and this is really a great resource that we can use much better for bicycling. But right now we have a lot of intersections where we have to fight. But this could be different, and we'll be showing you some ways how that could be done. And looking at this aerial picture with downtown Boston in the background, we see this ribbon, this blue ribbon, and the parks along it as they go along the Charles. And then it brings us back to the historic Storrow Drive, which was built not as Storrow Drive, but it was built here along the Back Bay as a place where people could ride in their carriages, they could stroll, some people would bicycle, and that all today looks very different and is very car oriented. So to bring it back, to make it a more friendly environment for bicycling and walking, this is our goal. This is a vision that was created for MIT, where you see what's now the Mass Avenue Bridge, the Harvard Bridge, and there's actually an underpass and a pass that goes underneath the bridge, and even a way to experience the water. Now that we have the Zakim Bridge, we have the turnpike, much of the traffic is taken up by these ways of transportation. So it should be now easier to make those parklands real parklands and to move along them in an interesting way. And we created this map, and maybe Fred, you might want to comment on this map with the current bridges and the underpasses.
Yeah, well, I think as you said, the river is a tremendously valuable asset, especially for walking and bicycling and jogging. And the automobiles on both sides really are interfering with that function. Given that the turnpike is built, given that the reason we did the Zakim Bridge so big, which a lot of people objected to, and I understand why, but the whole purpose in having the depression of the central artery and the Zakim Bridge leading into it was to give a place for the cars to go that would be underground and out of sight, and allow the city streets and allow the parkways to really be much more for people, for pedestrians, and for bicycles. And particularly along the Charles River, we have a terrific opportunity to achieve that. Now, because of your advocacy, you've succeeded in getting a reasonable amount of people focused, in fact a very large number of people focused on the desirability of providing underpasses, particularly on the Boston side. And I think what you can see on this kind of regional map is that of course, everyone who knows the river knows that the Cambridge side is generally much nicer than the Boston side. The Boston side is much more dominated by automobiles. Soldiers Field Road is more auto-oriented than Memorial Drive. But the Cambridge side, even though it's nicer, is becoming overcrowded. There are so many pedestrians, so many joggers, so many bicycles, that they're conflicting with each other. And the Boston side of the river is not doing its share. So your vision of the underpasses would allow a continuous walkway and bicycle path along the level of the river, all the way from the Arsenal Street bridge
Which
in
is not
Brighton.
even on that picture here. It's to the
Yeah,
left
just,
of the picture.
just off
yeah.
of the map, you have Arsenal Street. You have a large parking lot in the park where people could come with their children, with their bicycles, to leave their car behind and either walk or bicycle the rest of the way. And the vision you've put out there of having, at least on the Boston side, underpasses so that pedestrians and bicycles don't have to cross the traffic at the Elliott Bridge, at the Anderson Bridge, at the Western Avenue Bridge, at the River Street Bridge. That's a tremendous improvement over the status quo. We've got reasonable pedestrian paths and bicycle paths along Storrow Drive near the river, where the people want to be, all the way from the Craigie Dam, where the Science Museum is, under Longfellow Bridge, although hopefully we'll see Longfellow Bridge made much nicer, and hopefully we'll see Storrow Drive confined both directions under one arch rather than the incursion into the Esplanade, which tragically occurred there in about 50 years ago. So we've got an opportunity to make Longfellow much nicer. Then from Longfellow all the way past the Mass Avenue Bridge, you've got reasonable paths and you don't have to cross streets. And then you go a little further and then you come to River Street, if you were coming from Boston, and it becomes totally horrible. If you're a pedestrian, if you're on a bicycle, for that matter, if you're in a car, it becomes pretty horrible. It's very congested. There's not much space. The ramp leads the cars to a conflict point with the River Street traffic. It's very difficult for a pedestrian to cross that street or for a bicycle to cross River Street.
Right now, it's there's no lighting, there's no light, there's nothing. I mean, the cars, they all have underpasses, but for bicyclists, there's no signage there.
Yeah, and so people will take risks and cross even though they have no light, but that's very dangerous. And since the state is now committed to rebuilding these bridges, and this is an opportunity that comes once every 50 years or so, it would be a sin not to take this opportunity to correct this major deficiency and get an underpass at River Street, an underpass at Western Avenue, and an underpass at the Anderson Bridge that leads into Howard Square. That way, on the Boston side, you'd have really excellent facilities for pedestrians and bicycles close to the water where people want to be, protected from having to deal with the traffic of the street.
Yeah, let's look at some pictures of an existing underpass at the Elliott Bridge, and also an existing one at Leechmere Canal, and then what we all would like to see, like the Seine in Paris, where you can bicycle. Here it's a road that's taken over for bicyclists. But the Anderson Bridge is the first one we looked at, and maybe Fred, you want to comment on the Anderson Bridge of what's improved, what Mass DOT proposes to do.
Well, what Mass DOT is about to begin construction on is a change in the configuration of the bridge itself, so that instead of 2 lanes for automobiles in each direction and 2 sidewalks, there'll be only 3 lanes for automobiles, 2 towards Cambridge, 1 towards Boston, which creates enough room for bicycle paths as well as sidewalks crossing the river. Now that's a modest improvement for both the bicycles and the pedestrians. It's an improvement for the pedestrians because the bicycles now end up on the sidewalk, and that's dangerous for the pedestrians. So having bicycle lanes will improve things for pedestrians, but there's a risk that it makes things so much worse for the cars and the buses that it creates a bottleneck. What the state hasn't yet done, but what we're urging them to do, is to recognize that the off-ramp coming from Boston toward Harvard Square is important for automobiles. But the left turn towards Harvard Stadium is not all that important. There are other ways to get to Harvard Stadium. Similarly, the westbound on-ramp onto Soldiers Field Road is not that heavily used. So there's an opportunity to capture some of that space on those two ramps for bicycles and pedestrians, and to prohibit left-turning automobiles. The prohibition on the left-turning automobiles will allow the traffic to function better. Now, you might ask yourself, why do pedestrians and bicycles care if the automobiles function better? The reason is, if this thing becomes gridlocked, then there'll be no signal time given to the pedestrians and bicycles attempting to go along the river, and with no underpass, it's really quite a terrible situation.
Yeah.
So what you've been advocating, and I strongly support, is a two-phase approach. Number one, seek to convince the state to prohibit some of these left turns and make some of the space on the ramps closest to the river available for bicycles, which will free up the sidewalk to be exclusively for pedestrians. So that'll make things better for both the pedestrians and the bicycles. Prohibit the left turns, which will make things better for the automobiles and the buses. And then we'll have at least a stable situation. But the real improvement is to get an underpass so that those bicycles and pedestrians who want to proceed along the Charles, which a lot of people do, will not have to get into the conflicts with the automobile up at the street. Now that, again, it's like Jack Spratt and his wife. It'll be good for everyone, because having everyone at the same level, the cars crossing the river and the bicycles and pedestrians attempting to proceed along the river, maximizes the conflict. So the underpass minimizes the conflict.
Let's look at the area where such an underpass could take place. This is the Boston side, both upriver and downriver, and this is what Mass DOT proposed, and they right now at least leaving the space open, but they haven't agreed to build it. And here we're looking at the site. This is downriver of the Boston side, and here is an artist's rendering who took actually an underpass from Central Park and showed of how that could look like. One other artist showed it here, of how that could be done, to go past the bridge along this pathway. So this is kind of where we hope that we will end up. Right now the space is being reserved for it, but that is not the case at the other bridges.
If you could go back to that image.
Yes.
Renata, excuse me. There is a point of conflict here that we have to be open about. There are some people who believe that because this bridge is historic, it can't be changed. Now that's a very, I think, inappropriate view of history. History isn't a snapshot. History is about change. This bridge itself was changed several times since it was originally built. If we go back 400 years, there was no bridge. One of the first bridges across the Charles was in this location, and it looked nothing like this. So to arbitrarily say that we take the way the bridge looks today in 2012 and it must forever look that way is really a denial of the evolution of the Charles. I think you can see in this artist's rendering that the addition of the underpass for pedestrians and joggers and bicycles with that nice little archway so that they don't have to conflict with the cars up on the street is a very nice looking modification of the bridge. And it's appropriate, I think, to update the history of the bridge to accommodate the important pedestrian and bicycle activity that is now badly frustrated by the current design. So there will be a need to communicate with the historic commissions on the Boston side and on the Cambridge side. I was a founding member of the Boston Landmarks Commission. I believe in historic preservation, but I also believe it's important to recognize that the function is what's important, and the pedestrian and bicycle access to the river is a function that's currently frustrated, that really deserves to be accommodated, and I think you can see from your artist's rendering that it can be done in a very nice way. So that's a conversation that needs to take place, and people who support this vision of the Charles River Conservancy really need to support it with the Cambridge
with the
landmarks
Boston
and
landmarks,
Boston landmarks,
and the
and
state's
with the
historic
state,
commission.
because and I am a supporter that these commissions have a very strong regulatory role, because I think in the past people have ignored history much too much. But I think a thoughtful modification is totally appropriate, and we need to be able to have that conversation.
Yeah, let's move on maybe to the other bridges. We are now here at the Western Avenue Bridge, which is probably the least bad of the three bridges. And we see here what the improvement is, because the traffic only comes in one direction, so it's relatively easy also to improve that. But there is space for an underpass here too. Do you want to comment further on Western Avenue?
Well, only to say, as you could see on the other artist's rendering, and I think in this diagram, the underpasses that the Charles River Conservancy is proposing in no way constrain the river itself. This would in no way interfere with boating, which is another very important activity on the river. The idea is to use space that's now really going wasted on the Boston side, adjacent to the Soldiers Field Road. There is space that is really not used by anyone, that could accommodate the pedestrians and bicycles in the underpass with no damage to the river, no damage to boating, and actually improve things for the automobiles that are up at the surface level. So in a way, you're right, Western Avenue is the least bad of the three. On the other hand, it's the easiest one to fix, so we should fix it. While we're fixing the bridge, let's get it right.
Yeah, and what you mentioned earlier is this continuous pathway starting at the Craigie Bridge at the Museum of Science, going all the way to Arsenal. That's actually 7.5 miles of uninterrupted pathway. So that would be a really amazing breakthrough in terms of bicycling, and that's also probably why Commissioner Tinlin of Boston and the mayor are supporting it. That kind of ties in with the hubway bikes that you can really use, and the people who want to bicycle along the river.
Yeah, you're right, and I think the support of Mayor Menino and Commissioner Tinlin is very important and very significant, and will hopefully allow you to get the support and cooperation of the historic commissions. The other point to make here, I'm conscious that we're on cable TV in Cambridge, is that the better the Boston side functions, because it functions very badly for pedestrians and bicycles today, that will allow a lot of bicycles and pedestrians to use the Boston side, because the Cambridge side is now really being overused. Anyone who walks there knows that the intensity of use has the grass all beaten down, and if you're walking along, you're constantly interrupted by a bicycle, and it's no one's fault. There's too many people trying to use too confined a space. So if we can significantly improve the Boston side, which your vision will do, that's not only good for Boston, it's very good for Cambridge, because of some of the excessive use on the Memorial Drive Cambridge side will shift over to the Boston side, leaving more room to make the Cambridge side the kind of relaxed experience that it really should be, but all too often is not very relaxed today.
And to give credit to people in Cambridge, State Representative Wolf, as well as State Representative Marty Walls and Senator Sal Domenico, have been very supportive of the underpasses, and the City Council actually voted in favor of the underpasses. So there has been a lot of support from Cambridge, as well as many other organizations.
Yeah, and also the support from Congressman Capuano, who is the congressman from both sides of the river.
Both sides of the river.
Boston and Cambridge, and his support is very important. He's on the federal Congress's transportation subcommittee of the Public Works Committee, So he's a very important person to have supporting
Yeah.
your efforts on this. So I think this is a very good idea with a lot of support from the mayor, from Cambridge officials, from the congressman.
Yeah. Well, let's look at the really bad bridge here, the River Street Bridge, which we all know is absolutely the worst of the three, that needs fixing. And we're talking again just about the Boston side of the river, to add an underpass. And this is the proposal that Mass DOT came up with, but it's a little bit better than what we have now, but it doesn't really address the issue of all these different lanes coming together and the conflict that will continue to exist.
Yeah, this is really one of the worst intersections in the state, because all of that traffic pouring off of the turnpike, attempting to get some onto Storrow Drive, some onto Memorial Drive, just conflict with everything. It's so intensively used. Even the state's effort to improve it is scarcely better than nothing. I mean, to be honest, they, I believe, have programmed an 8-second opportunity for pedestrians and bicyclists to cross the street.
That will be the best there is.
Which is better than zero, which is the status quo.
Yeah.
But it's absurd. I mean, this is the Charles River. It's a great asset, and the way to relieve this constraint is to recognize that there's simply not enough space at the surface level to do all of this. If your vision of adding the underpass for the bicycles and the pedestrians is implemented as part of the bridge construction, then we'll have a really dramatic improvement in the situation for pedestrians and bicycles, and an improvement for the automobiles as well, because we'll remove one source of conflict. So again, we only get to fix bridges like this once every 50 years or so.
75 years, yes.
It's essential that we do it once and do it right. And frankly, if they're not going to do it right, they should just postpone it. The bridge looks terrible, but it's not unsafe. And this has got to be done right. This is the time to do it right, or not do it at all. And I'm in favor of doing it right. I'm not advocating not doing it at all. But it just is silly to go to all the trouble. This is going to be not only a very costly enterprise, but a very disruptive process to rebuild these bridges while automobiles and trucks and buses attempt to continue to use them, is going to be very, very difficult to live with.
Yeah.
It's worth going through the pain, but only if what comes out the other side is wonderful.
But
to
right
go through
now,
all of that and not have it work at the end is just a terrible waste.
And right now, there is not even a plan to leave space for underpasses. The Anderson Bridge, at least Mass DOT has agreed to leave space, so it could be added. But right now, at Western Avenue and River Street, there is no such plan. And to look at, there is space upriver, and downriver it's a little bit more difficult, but Mass DOT has come up with a plan. Some soil needs to be added. Here is the existing situation downriver, and here is an artist's rendering of how such an underpass could look like.
Yeah, no, personally, I like this artist's rendering fine, but there is a problem here that doesn't exist at Western Avenue or at the Anderson, which is this artist's rendering does show some fill placed in the river, which is a difficult permit to get because of all of the various environmental interests in protecting the quality of the Charles and the fish. It does not interfere with boating because the boats have to be
under the arch.
Under the arch.
Yeah.
But the idea that my fellow Alston Brighton resident
Harry Madison, he came up with an alternative that would be less intrusive.
And that alternative effectively uses a boardwalk, so the flow of the water could continue uninterrupted, and all of the concerns, the legitimate concerns that people have about whether it interferes with flow of fish and flow of water, can be dealt with by using the boardwalk concept. Now, this would not be the first time Decades ago, there was no way to get past the Boston University Bridge, and they solved that problem by adding a
A
boardwalk.
boardwalk, yeah, yeah,
And it works fine, and it
Yeah.
doesn't interfere with the flow of the water.
yeah,
And it does allow pedestrians and bicycles to proceed past what used to be a very serious obstacle.
yeah.
So I think this is a creative way to be able to work out the legitimate permitting questions. Now,
Yeah, Fred, I have to interrupt you because we are almost out of time. So we need to wind down. Just to recap that we have support from elected officials and organizations, but we now need our viewers to contact us and support the effort. And maybe you want to just mention again how this public input can make a difference.
well, I'd say two things. One, people should thank particularly Mayor Menino, Congressman Capuano, and the whole Cambridge City Council for their support, and Right Governor Patrick, who has not spoken on this issue. He's a very busy person. I supported him. I'm a Democrat, and I'm glad he's our governor. I understand he's very busy, but he needs to hear from people that we really care about the river and we want to see this get better. So I would urge people to thank those who have already supported, and to let the governor know that it's very important to fix this the right way. While we're gonna pay a lot of money for it, we're gonna suffer through a lot of traffic disruption during construction. It's essential that at the end of the day, we end up with this wonderful vision that you've put forward of a continuous pedestrian bicycle pathway all the way from the Charles River Dam out to the Arsenal Street Bridge between Brighton and Watertown.
Yeah. Well, Fred, thank you for coming today, and thank you for lending your transportation wisdom to this issue. And we'll continue to work on that, and we need all your support to make that happen. Thank you very much, and join us again on the Conservancy Show another time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.